"Where the hell did you get that patch?" The words cut through the hangar like a gunshot. Zara Vale didn't look up. Her hands kept moving, wiping down the M197 cannon of the AH-1Z Viper with the precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Major Ronan Creed stood frozen a few steps away, eyes locked on the black and crimson insignia half hidden on her sleeve. Around them, the morning chatter died into silence. That patch wasn't supposed to exist, and the woman cleaning the gun wasn't supposed to be alive. This is Veteran Biker. Comment 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week, like, subscribe, and stay to the end. The morning sun pushed weakly through a low ceiling of mist, casting the entire base in a muted grey wash. Forward operating base Cliffside looked as if it had been carved into the coastline by stubbornness alone. A strip of asphalt runway perched at the edge of a sheer drop, ending abruptly where the ocean began its endless assault against the rock. Waves pounded the cliff face below in a constant rolling rhythm, a reminder that nature was always waiting for the moment man's defenses failed. The smell of salt water mixed with the tang of hydraulic fluid and jet fuel seeping into every hangar and corridor. On the tarmac, a line of R1Z Vipers sat in perfect formation, rotor blades shrouded, fuselages gleaming under the thin light. They were tools of precision violence built for speed and lethality, but in this morning fog they looked almost spectral, outlines softened, their predatory edges blurred. Mechanics moved between them, tools clinking softly, radios murmuring logistics in clipped bursts. The atmosphere was calm, but it carried the sense of a machine at idle, ready to roar at a moment's notice. In the open-air maintenance bay, Zara Vale was the center of her own universe. The Viper she worked on stood stripped at the nose. The M197 20mm cannon's internals exposed like the anatomy of a dangerous animal. Zara's movements were deliberate, not slow but exact, every motion placed with the assurance of someone who had done this hundreds of times and would do it hundreds more. She wore an olive-green flight suit, its knees and elbows darkened from years of honest work, the sleeves rolled just above her forearms. Her braid, dark brown and tight, left only a few rebellious strands loose to stick against her forehead in the damp air. She didn't glance at the clock. She didn't join the small talk that drifted between workstations. Her entire focus was on the weapon in front of her, hands moving like they were part of the machine, tightening a bolt, adjusting a feed, running her fingertips lightly along the metal to feel for imperfections. If there was a world outside the few feet of space around the cannon, she gave no sign of acknowledging it. The base's security drill siren shattered that calm. A sharp, pulsing tone echoed across Cliffside, bouncing off hangar walls, cutting through every conversation. The effect was immediate. Tools set down, radios cut off mid-word, personnel moving in crisp lines toward muster points. The loudspeakers followed a heartbeat later, the voice flat and authoritative. "Attention! Condition Alpha security drill. All personnel proceed to assigned posts." The maintenance bay emptied in moments, boots striking the concrete in quick succession, but Zara didn't move. Her hands didn't falter on the cannon's mechanisms. Her head didn't lift to scan for authority figures. The drill was just noise to her, background static against the precision in her fingertips. She set a final screw, twisted it with the faintest metallic click, and only then reached for the next tool. On the far side of the tarmac, Major Ronan Creed emerged from the barracks with a squad of pilots, the pace brisk, the mood tinged with irritation. Drills broke rhythm. He had sorties to plan, briefings to lead, the kind of ordered schedule that left no space for interruptions. Creed wore his flight suit like it had been pressed inside the hangar, the creases sharp, the patches aligned perfectly. His stride was long and assured, a man accustomed to command in the cockpit and respect on the ground. He wasn't looking for anything in the maintenance bay, not until a sliver of stillness caught his peripheral vision. In a scene where every other body was in motion, Zara Vale remained rooted, working with the same calm focus she'd had before the alarm. His gaze lingered just long enough to notice the partially rolled sleeve, the small circular patch stitched into the fabric. Black background, deep crimson vortex, a stylized wing slicing through its center. He stopped mid-stride, one boot hitting the tarmac harder than the other, his momentum gone in an instant. That image didn't belong here. Not on a weapons tech, not on any uniform outside of a locked archive file. The patch had weight far beyond its thread. Creed's stomach tightened, a flicker of something cold sliding down his spine. The Shadow Vortex unit. He had seen it only in redacted reports and classified briefings years ago, each mention so carefully hedged it was as if the military itself was afraid to say the name too clearly. A unit formed from the sharpest edges of the most elite forces across allied nations, tasked with operations so sensitive they were denied before they were even conceived. And according to every record that wasn't black ink on white paper, the Shadow Vortex had ceased to exist after the Black Haven incident, ceased in the absolute sense. No survivors, no return. And yet the patch was here, on a quiet, grease-smudged technician tightening the feed tray on a Cobra's cannon. Creed's thoughts narrowed to a single point. Either the impossible was standing 15 feet away from him, or someone had managed to fake a mark so dangerous it could get a person killed just for wearing it. Neither possibility sat well in his gut. Zara didn't look up. She reached for another tool, checked the weapon's action with a precise pull, and went back to her work as if the Major's presence was no more important than the hum of a generator. Creed forced himself to move again, each step a deliberate act to keep from showing his hand. His eyes stayed forward, but the image of the patch burned behind them like an after-image from staring at the sun. He adjusted course, not toward the briefing hall now, but toward the single office in the base where he could drop a live grenade of information without it exploding in his own face. Colonel Damon Stroud would need to hear about this, and he would need to hear it now. The office of Colonel Damon Stroud sat at the far end of the command wing, its windows facing the endless grey expanse of the sea. Inside, it was a study in military discipline, a heavy wooden desk positioned with mathematical precision, 2 hard-backed chairs for visitors, and a single bookshelf lined with manuals, after-action reports, and binders marked with red warning labels. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and salt carried in from the coast. Stroud himself was behind the desk, broad shoulders squared, reading glasses perched low as he scanned a report. His uniform was immaculate, ribbons aligned in a perfect row. He had the kind of face that looked carved rather than grown, deep lines earned from long deployments and harder decisions. The faint creak of boots on the threshold made him look up. "Creed," he said, the name carrying the weight of both recognition and mild reproach. "Briefing hall's the other way." The Major stepped in and closed the door with deliberate care, the metallic click punctuating the quiet. "Sir, we've got a problem, and I can't run it through channels." His voice was lower than usual, stripped of its easy confidence. Stroud set the report aside, the faintest narrowing of his eyes signaling attention. "Go on." Creed took a breath. "Maintenance bay. Technician named Zara Vale. She's wearing a patch. Blackfield crimson vortex wing through the center." The colonel's face stayed neutral, but the pause after Creed's words was heavy. "You're sure?" "As sure as I've ever been of anything. I've seen it in classified imagery, files so buried they barely existed." Stroud leaned back, the chair's springs groaning. That's not a unit. That's a ghost story. No, sir, Creed said, his voice hardening. It's the Shadow Vortex unit, supposed to be gone. Blackhaven incident. Total loss. A long moment stretched between them. Outside, the faint roar of waves undercut the silence. Finally, Stroud reached for his desk phone, his eyes fixed on Creed. Stay put. He dialed a short, secure code. Get Intelligence Officer Ilara Quinn in my office. Now. The handset hit the cradle with a muted thud. Minutes later, the door opened to admit a tall, slender woman in an army uniform so crisp it looked freshly issued. Ilara Quinn's light brown hair was drawn into a severe bun, her expression unreadable. She closed the door behind her and stepped forward with silent precision. "Colonel," she said, voice even. "Major." Stroud gestured toward Creed. "The Major here believes one of our techs is wearing the mark of the Shadow Vortex unit." Quinn's eyes flicked to Creed, then back to Stroud. "Name? Zara Vale." The shift was subtle, but Creed caught it, the slight straightening of her spine, the tiniest pause before her next breath. Stroud caught it too. "You know the name. I've seen it. Once," Quinn said carefully, "cross-referenced on an old operational roster. That file was sealed before I could finish reading it." "She's here," Creed said. "And if that patch is real, either she's the only survivor of Blackhaven or someone's using a mark that should never be on this base." Stroud stood. "Then we're going to find out which." They moved together, three figures crossing the tarmac with the purposeful stride of people carrying orders too sensitive for paper. The mist had thinned, the sun now strong enough to throw pale reflections off the Viper's canopies. Around them, the rhythm of the base was settling back after the drill, mechanics returning to work, the steady hum of generators filling the air. The maintenance bay was still in motion when they entered, tools clattering, voices calling part numbers, the metallic tang of machine oil thick in the air. At the far end, Zara Vale was exactly where Creed had left her, crouched by the open nose of the Viper, one hand bracing against the fuselage as she adjusted the feed assembly. She looked up only when Stroud's voice cut across the space. "Technician Vale!" Every head in the bay turned. Tools stopped mid-motion. Stroud's command voice had that effect. Zara set her wrench down on the magnetic tray beside her, stood and faced them. Her expression was calm, her posture unconsciously precise, feet together, shoulders square. Stroud closed the distance until he was a single step away. His voice dropped low enough that only she, Creed, and Quinn could hear. "Lieutenant Colonel Vale, Shadow Vortex Unit. Confirm or deny." For a heartbeat, there was no sound except the distant whine of a power tool from another hangar. Zara's gaze moved from Stroud to Creed, then to Quinn, holding each for just a moment. When she spoke, her voice was level, without hesitation. "Confirm. I was the sole survivor of Blackhaven. 5 years ago." Creed felt the words land in the pit of his stomach. The impossible confirmed in a tone so steady it almost sounded routine. "I was declared dead," Zara continued, "to give me the cover I needed to hunt the ones responsible. Iron Serpent, private military syndicate. They dismantled my unit, ambushed us at Blackhaven, and left no one standing but me. I've been tracking them ever since." Quinn's eyes sharpened. "And here?" Zara glanced at the Viper behind her, modifying its Falcon Eye system, originally built for targeting and recon. "I've re-engineered it to intercept encrypted naval satellite traffic. Iron Serpent moves its hardware by sea, masked as commercial cargo. They use a specific satellite network. Falcon Eye, my version, can listen in." Creed understood now why she'd ignored the drill alarm. This wasn't maintenance, it was an operation. "How close?" Stroud asked. "Final module's nearly in." "Once I transmit, the system burns out. Permanent fry. They'll know they've been breached within minutes. But the data..." She let the sentence trail, the implication clear. Stroud looked between Quinn and Creed. If she's telling the truth, she's been running a one-woman intelligence op under our noses. If she's lying, we've got the most dangerous infiltrator Iron Serpent could send. Quinn studied Zara like a puzzle with only one missing piece. Then we verify, and we move fast. Iron Serpent won't sit idle if they catch wind of this. Zara's eyes didn't waver. They already know more than you think. The quiet that followed wasn't confusion. It was the shift in atmosphere when everyone in the room realizes they've just stepped onto a different kind of battlefield. Quinn didn't waste time asking for permission. She pivoted away from the confrontation, unhooked the ruggedized tablet from the pouch at her hip, and began tapping through secure logins. The device booted straight into a classified network dashboard, its green-lit interface a map of the base's digital bloodstream, every authorized signal, every encrypted burst, every scrap of data that flowed in or out. The maintenance bay around them resumed in cautious fragments. Mechanics pretending to go back to work, but keeping one ear turned toward the cluster at the Viper's nose. Creed stayed a step off to Zara's right, watching the intelligence officer's fingers flick through menus like a pianist hitting a practiced sequence. "What are you looking for?" Stroud asked quietly. "Not looking," Quinn replied, eyes never leaving the screen, filtering. "Friendly transmissions have a digital signature. Think of it as a heartbeat. I'm pulling everyone that doesn't match." Rows of coded entries scrolled past. She narrowed the search, filtering by packet size and timing. A handful of anomalies blinked at the bottom of the list. She isolated one, opened its metadata, and stilled. "There," she said, "one burst, 57 minutes ago, wrong frequency, wrong encryption handshake. That's Iron Serpent's comms protocol. I've seen it in recovered black box data." Creed's brows drew together. "You're telling me we had a Serpent transmission go out from this base in the last hour?" Quinn nodded once. "And I can tell you exactly where it came from." Her fingers danced again, cross-referencing IPs with physical access points. A location popped up on the map, an outlying structure marked in yellow. "The fuel depot," she said flatly. "Terminal 4B. Another keystroke brought up the user ID attached to the login. Supply Sergeant Kellen Price. Stroud's jaw tightened. 2 years on my roster. No disciplinary marks. He's got depot clearance and full access to flight schedules." Zara's gaze sharpened, but she didn't look surprised. "Then he saw me working on Falcon Eye, and he told them exactly what stage I'm at." Quinn turned toward her. "How can you be sure?" "Because if I were him, that's the moment I'd send the signal." Her voice was matter-of-fact, without drama. "Falcon Eye operational means their entire shipping network is at risk. They can't let it exist." Stroud reached for the radio clipped to his vest. "Security to depot." "No." Zara's interruption was sharp enough to halt him mid-motion. Stroud's eyes narrowed. "Explain. They don't run counter-intel like we do," she said. "Iron Serpent's doctrine is speed and overkill. That burst wasn't just a status update, it was a trigger. They've got a strike package already staged within reach. By the time you put hands on Price, the assault will already be inbound." A thin silence fell over the four of them. Outside the bay, the metallic clank of a dropped wrench echoed far too loud. Quinn glanced down at her tablet. "I can check." She didn't finish. A sharp triple-tone alarm blared from the command net, distinct from the drill siren earlier. Stroud's shoulder mic crackled to life. The voice on the other end clipped and tense. "Command to all stations, radar contact. Multiple high-speed surface vessels inbound from the southeast. Estimated time to shoreline, 12 minutes. We also have a fast-moving ground convoy approaching from the North Access Road, 9 minutes out." Stroud's reply was immediate, pincer movement. His gaze cut to Quinn. "How many on the water?" "5 contacts," came the voice over comms. "Configured like ribs, could be armed." Creed was already mapping it in his head. That road brings them straight to the main gate. The cliffside service gate's their water entry. They hit both, we're boxed. Quinn looked back at her display, zooming the map to the base perimeter. The coastal gate's thin, chain link, minimal fortification. They breach that. They're inside the fuel lines in 2 minutes. Stroud switched channels, his voice going command level loud. All Marines to cliffside gate, fortify and hold. No breach, do you hear me? End of day to secondary ammo depot, rig for demolition. If the perimeter falls, I want nothing left for them to use. Orders acknowledged in rapid bursts of copy, that through the static. Creed turned to Zara. If you're right, we don't have long. Falcon Eye needs to move now. She met his gaze without blinking. Then get me airborne. I'll finish the final module in flight. The decision solidified instantly. Creed peeled off toward the Viper's ladder, stripping away the rotor covers as he moved. Zara followed, snagging a small black case from her workbench on the way, the size of a hardback novel, locked with a biometric latch. She cradled it in one hand like it contained the only fragile thing she'd ever valued. Behind them, Stroud and Quinn shifted to the side of the bay, running parallel comms, one to direct defensive fire teams, the other to monitor enemy movement. Creed swung up into the pilot's seat, fingers flicking across the pre-flight switches in practiced sequence. The cockpit hummed to life, dials climbing, systems warming. Zara climbed in behind him, sliding into the weapons officer's seat. Hydraulics green, Creed called. Fuel at 93%, Zara secured the black case to a recessed port beside her console. Final module ready. Once it's in, Falcon Eye goes live. The Viper's twin engines roared higher, rotor blades beginning their slow rotation. Outside, ground crew scattered back from the wash. Quinn's voice cut in over comms from the bay entrance. Convoy is accelerating. They're pushing flat out. Water contacts split into 2 groups, 3 heading for the gate, 2 peeling off. Possible flanking attempt. Stroud answered from somewhere in the background. Then plug the gap before they get creative. Creed eased the collective, the Viper lifting a bare foot off the concrete. The air churned in violent spirals, kicking up grit. Zara's hands moved fast over her screens, initiating Falcon Eye's boot sequence. Codes scrolled, the system calibrating to the Viper's optics. I'll need clear sky over water to lock on the satellite. We get that window, I can start pulling their comms. The radio erupted with a burst of staccato gunfire, then a voice shouting over the din, main gate engaged, small arms and heavy caliber incoming. Stroud's reply was ice. Hold. Your line. Creed pushed the nose forward, clearing the bay threshold. The Viper surged into the damp morning air, banking toward the open coastline. The base fell away behind them, a grid of concrete and steel already bristling with muzzle flashes at its edges. Zara kept her eyes on her displays, but Creed caught her reflection in the canopy glass. Not tense, not afraid, just completely present, like every part of her mind had narrowed to the work in front of her. Quinn's last update before they banked out of radio range carried a note Creed hadn't heard from her before. Urgency edging into something else. Whatever you're doing up there, make it fast. They're not here to take prisoners. The ocean opened beneath them, grey and restless. Ahead, the horizon was a smear of darker shapes moving fast. The clock had started. The Viper hugged the cliff line, skimming the ragged edge where black rock met white water. Salt spray drifted up in fine mist, catching the rotor wash and scattering like powdered glass. Ronan Creed kept the nose low, the altimeter needle flirting with sea level. From this angle, the coastline stretched away behind them in a series of jagged cuts, the base already shrinking into a grey smudge shrouded by gunmetal clouds. Zara Vale sat in the rear cockpit, the gunner's controls alive beneath her hands. Her helmet visor reflected a forest of targeting data and system readouts. The black case she'd carried was now locked into the Falcon Eye's interface bay, a stream of coded characters scrolling in the corner of her screen. She keyed in final alignment commands, fingers quick but steady. "Falcon Eye cycling up," she reported over the intercom. "Optics stable. Signal acquisition in 90 seconds. "Plenty of time," Creed answered, his tone light but focused, eyes scanning the sea ahead. He didn't add that his gut said otherwise. 90 seconds was an eternity when you were visible against open water. They cleared the headland, the world widening into a cold, flat horizon. The light out here was harsher, the mist thinner, no terrain to hide in, only sky and sea and the narrow line where they met. The Viper's rotor thrum was the only steady sound, a heartbeat in mechanical form. Zara's voice cut in again. "I've got movement, bearing 270, low to horizon, not surface craft, airborne." Creed adjusted his helmet display, toggling the forward radar. 2 returns popped into view, small but closing fast, their vectors cutting across open water toward the Viper's path. He zoomed in on the IFF tags, no friendly signal. "They're not ours," he said. "Profile fits KA-29 Helix B, twin coaxial rotors, heavy weapons mounts. Confirmed on optics," Zara said. "Formation tight. They're coming in for an intercept." Creed's grip tightened on the cyclic. The KA-29 wasn't a nimble scout or a light gunship. It was a slab-sided assault craft built to carry troops and unload firepower at close range. Against a Viper, they were a dangerous match, especially in pairs. "They'll try to bracket us," Creed muttered, more to himself than to her. "One pins us down, the other moves in for the kill. Then we don't let them set the bracket," Zara replied evenly. Creed smiled faintly under the visor. "Copy that." The K-29s grew in the canopy glass, their twin rotor discs counter-rotating in a blur, the noise of their engines now a faint snarl under the Viper's own. The lead machine peeled slightly right, the wingman angling left, the bracket starting to form. "Range 1.8 clicks," Zara called. "Lead bird arming nose cannon. Wingman has pods loaded, rockets or ATGMs." Creed rolled the Viper into a shallow bank, spoiling the K-29 seconds approach angle. The lead Helix responded with a burst of 30mm cannon fire, tracer rounds stitching the air where the Viper had been a second before. "Close," Creed said, eyes locked ahead. "Your show, Vale. Select your target." Taking the lead, she answered. Her HUD bracketed the KA-29 in a green diamond, range decreasing rapidly. She thumbed the weapon selector to the M197, the triple-barreled 20mm cannon slung under the Viper's chin, and waited for the tone. Creed kept the Viper moving, climbing and dropping in shallow arcs to throw off the Helix gunner's aim. The world became a rhythm of horizon and ocean, the G-forces pressing and releasing in cycles. "Tone acquired," Zara said. "Send it." The Viper's cannon erupted, the sound a deep metallic snarl that vibrated through the airframe. A stream of shells ripped forward, the tracers drawing a deadly straight-line answer to the Helix's earlier burst. Impacts peppered the KA-29's forward fuselage, sparking and tearing through armor plating. Smoke streamed from its nose as the rounds chewed into the gun housing. "Hit on the mount," Zara confirmed. Nose cannon disabled. The Helix veered abruptly, banking hard to port to break contact, but Creed pressed. He dropped the Viper's nose and closed the gap, giving Zara a clean shot at the rotor hub. "Rotor coupling in sight," she said, adjusting aim. She squeezed the trigger, another burst hammering into the spinning machinery. The upper rotor disc shuddered violently, then the whole assembly tore loose in a spray of debris. The Helix dropped out of the sky in a chaotic spin, disappearing into the white spray below. A moment later, a bloom of orange and black marked where it hit the sea. "One down," Creed said, rolling away from the kill zone. "Where's the wingman?" Closing fast, high 5 o'clock, Zara replied. Creed shoved the cyclic forward, pulling the Viper into a diving turn that brought the second Ka-29 into view. The wingman had hung back just far enough to watch its partner die, and now it was moving in with a kind of deliberate menace. "They're locking," Zara warned. A sharp electronic tone filled both cockpits. Missile warning. "Brake!" Creed hauled the Viper into a hard climb, banking left. The G-force shoved him deep into the seat as he popped flares, a string of white-hot decoys tumbling away in glowing arcs. The missile streaked into the cluster, detonating in a blinding flash that rocked the Viper with the shockwave. "Missed," Creed reported, leveling out. "He's still back there." Zara switched to missiles, Hellfire armed. "Give me a window." Creed jinked the Viper in an erratic pattern, forcing the Ka-29 to adjust its approach, then rolled sharply to starboard, presenting Zara with a clean forward quarter on the target. "Window," he called. "Fox 1. The Hellfire dropped from its rail, rocket motor igniting with a roar. It streaked across the sky, the guidance fins making minute corrections as Zara's laser kept the Ka-29 locked. The Helix pilot threw the machine into a desperate brake turn, but the missile corrected in mid-flight and slammed into the port engine housing. A blossom of fire ripped along the side of the fuselage. The Ka-29 staggered, losing altitude fast. It hit the water tail first, cartwheeling once before breaking apart in a spray of wreckage. Zara exhaled, fingers still on the trigger. 2 down. Creed let the Viper settle into level flight, the adrenaline edge sharpening his focus rather than dulling it. "Clear skies for the moment. How's Falcon Eye?" Zara glanced at the side display. "Still warming. The satellite link isn't up yet. We were inside their intercept window before I could complete the handshake." "Then we just bought ourselves that handshake," Creed said, banking gently back toward the open corridor over water. "Let's get your data before someone else shows up to keep us company." Beneath them, the sea rolled on indifferent to the brief violence above. Ahead, the horizon was once again empty. But Creed knew better than to believe in emptiness for long. The Viper leveled out in a corridor of open air, nothing but grey sea below and a thin strip of sky above. Ronan Creed kept the collective steady, every muscle tuned to holding the gunship rock solid. The instrument panel glowed a muted green, the digital horizon locked dead center. "Falcon Eye handshake initiated," Zara said behind him, her voice low in the intercom. "Satellite link in 3, 2, link established. Transmission channel open." He didn't need to see her screen to know the stakes. When you transmitted over a line-of-sight uplink, you became a flare in the dark for anyone looking. The Viper might as well have been on a parade ground with floodlights blazing. "How long?" Creed asked. 2 minutes, 38 seconds for the full dump, she replied, fingers flying over the console to manage packet sequence and encryption masking. "That's if nothing interrupts us." He kept his eyes sweeping the horizon, checking both forward and peripheral displays. The sea below was deceptively calm, broken only by whitecaps where wind met current. A flicker in his canopy reflection caught his attention, not in the air but below. Movement faint and fast, slicing through the water. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Zara," he said, "confirm surface contact 6 o'clock low." Her scope shifted, magnifying the wake patterns. 3 fast movers, rib-class hulls, modified. They're pushing 35 knots and climbing. Armament? Looks like mounted heavy machine guns on the bow. Maybe RPGs stowed aft. ETA? Less than a minute to firing range. The calm in her voice belied the calculation in her eyes. Creed knew what she was thinking. Low-profile boats in tight formation were designed to overwhelm a target's attention, force it into defensive maneuvers that broke whatever mission it was trying to complete. And right now, they were the definition of a predictable target. He exhaled slowly. We hold until they're too close to miss. Then we move. The boats cut white scars into the ocean surface, spray flaring high from their bows. At this altitude, Creed could see the crew, masked figures braced against the recoil of mounted weapons, eyes fixed upward. The lead boat's gunner swung a heavy barrel toward them. "Here we go," Zara murmured. A line of tracers erupted from the water, bright orange arcs clawing skyward. The rounds passed short, but the distance was closing fast. Creed didn't flinch. "Hold! Hold!" Another burst lanced upward, closer this time. Creed's eyes flicked to the timer on his HUD. 1 minute, 40 seconds left on the uplink. "Now!" he snapped. He shoved the cyclic forward, dropping the Viper into a steep nose-down dive. The sudden acceleration pushed them into their harnesses, rotor noise rising into a sharper pitch. Salt spray streaked across the canopy as they closed on the lead boat in seconds. Zara had already pivoted the M197 cannon, targeting reticle locked dead center on the bow gun mount. She squeezed the trigger. The Viper's cannon thundered, 3 barrels rotating in a lethal blur, sending a stream of 20mm shells straight into the boat's forward section. Armor-piercing rounds tore through the gunner and mount alike. The weapon fell silent as the boat slewed sideways, momentum carrying it into the path of the second craft. "Leads out," Zara called. Creed rolled them hard to port, bringing the second rib into her sights. The gunner on that boat fired wildly, tracers skipping harmlessly into open water as Creed's maneuver threw off his aim. "Target acquired," Zara said, voice sharp. "Now?" She held the trigger down for a controlled burst. Rounds punched into the RIB's port side, tearing into the engine housing. Flames blossomed, followed by a gout of black smoke. The boat slowed abruptly, dead in the water. "2 down," Creed confirmed. "Where's number 3? Zara pivoted the optics. The last RIB was breaking away, angling off to starboard at full throttle. "They're running," she said. Creed pulled the Viper into a climbing turn, shadowing the fleeing boat. Range? 800 meters and stretching. He glanced at the ammo count for the cannon, then at the Hellfire rack. "We're not wasting a missile. Cut him loose. His retreat's worth more than the kill. He'll be broadcasting that we're not worth chasing." Zara switched back to the Falcon Eye display without argument. Reacquiring uplink. Handshake still good? Resuming transfer now. Creed leveled the Viper, bringing them back to the exact corridor they'd left. Every instinct told him to zigzag, to climb and drop, to be anywhere but here, but the mission demanded otherwise. "Time to completion?" he asked. 1 minute, 12 seconds, she said. Her tone had that razor focus again, not tight with fear, but edged with the awareness that one stray contact could undo everything. The seconds dragged. He could hear his own breathing in the headset, the faint hum of avionics, the muted clatter of keys under her gloves. 30 seconds, she reported. Ahead, the horizon shimmered, heat haze or low cloud, hard to tell at this distance. Creed kept scanning, forcing himself not to count down in his head. Then her voice cut through, sharper than before. Transfer complete. He felt the knot in his chest loosen a fraction. "Data's secure," she said. "Everything they've been doing for 5 years. Shipping routes, asset locations, comms infrastructure. It's all in Command's hands now." "Then let's not hang around to see who shows up next," Creed replied, already banking away from the corridor. The Viper climbed, the sea falling away beneath them, and the coastline began to reappear through the mist ahead. Somewhere beyond those cliffs, the base was still locked in its own fight. But up here, for the first time since lifting off, Creed felt the mission tilt from impossible toward done. Zara leaned back in her seat, but her eyes didn't leave the displays. "1 stage down. Now comes the hard part." Creed didn't ask. He knew exactly what she meant. The coastline rose ahead, jagged cliffs shrouded in ribbons of mist that thinned as the Viper climbed. From altitude, forward operating base cliffside was a steel and concrete fortress wedged into inhospitable rock, but the view was anything but calm. Black plumes marked impact zones along the perimeter, tiny muzzle flashes sparking in frantic succession. The radio was alive now, overlapping calls in clipped, urgent tones. Need suppression on the north wall. Incoming from the service road ammo running low at checkpoint 3, Creed kept the Viper steady in a wide approach arc, avoiding the obvious line of sight from the inland gate. "Zara, what's our ordnance status?" 70% cannon, 4 Hellfires, both rocket pods full, she replied. Her eyes tracked the shifting mess of friend or foe tags overlaying the terrain ahead. "If we hit the inland push first, we can relieve the gate before they breach." "Copy. Mark me a run." Inside the command center, Stroud stood over a table-sized tactical display, headset pressed tight to his ear. Quinn was next to him, her tablet jacked directly into the base's comms grid. The atmosphere was a controlled storm. Operators relaying positions, Marines calling for resupply, medics requesting clearance to move casualties. "Convoy split," Quinn reported, eyes scanning data feeds. Half at the main gate, half trying to skirt to the east maintenance yard. "They want the depot intact." "Not happening," Stroud said. Into the mic he barked, "End of day prep east yard for demolition. Stand by for my mark." A comm-tech looked up. "Sir, Viper 1 just entered the AO." Stroud's tone sharpened. "Patch me." Static cleared to the sound of rotor wash and Creed's voice. "Colonel, we're inbound from seaward, ordnance hot. Where do you want us?" Stroud didn't waste a beat. "Northgate's priority. They're minutes from forcing the barricade." "On it," Creed answered. From the air, the inland gate was a knot of chaos. Armored trucks positioned as makeshift battering rams, infantry fanned out in staggered firing lines. Beyond them, Iron Serpent's vehicles formed a rough perimeter, using shipping containers and troop carriers as cover. Targeting front lines, Zara called. She armed both rocket pods, firing ripple. The Viper's nose dipped slightly. 2 pairs of rockets screamed away, trailing white smoke. Impact detonations ripped through the front rank of vehicles, turning one into a rolling fireball, flipping another on its side. Figures scattered, some dropping prone, others retreating behind the still-standing trucks. "Good effect," Creed said, banking hard to set up a gun run. "Cannon's yours." Zara's reticle swept the ground, picking out gunners setting up a tripod-mounted weapon. She squeezed off a burst, the triple barrels roar cutting through the cockpit, shells chewing the emplacement into silence. On the ground, Marines surged forward from their barricades, taking advantage of the sudden gap. Creed kept the Viper moving, angling for another pass. In the command center, Quinn's voice was quick and sharp. "They're pulling back from the gate." But East Yard contact just doubled. They're trying to flank harder now that the north is softening. Stroud keyed his mic again. "Viper 1, new tasking. Break east. Hit the yard before they get into the fuel lines." "Roger," Creed replied, swinging the Viper toward the far side of the base. The east maintenance yard came into view, wide open, dotted with service sheds and the long silver cylinders of above-ground fuel tanks. Enemy technicals were already inside the outer fence, men spilling out to take positions behind equipment stacks. "They're inside the wire," Zara noted, voice flat. "Then we clear them?" Creed brought the Viper low, skimming the yard's edge. Zara shifted to Hellfires. "Laser on," she said. "Locked? Firing?" The missile streaked out, diving into the cluster of technicals. The explosion rolled across the yard, shrapnel and dust thrown high. Creed followed with a cannon pass, walking rounds across the fence line to cut down retreating shapes. Through the canopy, Zara spotted 2 figures breaking toward a fuel tank with tubes slung over their shoulders. "RPG teams, 3 o'clock!" Creed rolled sharply, lining them in her sights. Zara fired a short burst, fast, both attackers dropped before they could raise their launchers. In the command center, Quinn tracked the shift in the battle's flow. East yard clear for now. Gate pressure easing. They're regrouping outside effective range. Stroud's reply was measured. They've felt our bite. Now they'll decide if the prize is worth the teeth. Creed brought the Viper back into a wide holding pattern, scanning for any remaining hotspots. Smoke curled upward from both the yard and the inland gate, dissipating into the salt-heavy wind. "Looks like they're falling back," Zara said, "at least for now." "Then we keep eyes on them until we're sure," Creed answered. Stroud's voice came through the net, lower now but no less firm. "Viper 1, maintain overwatch. You bought us breathing room. Don't let them take it back." From their vantage point, the base below was still scarred but alive. Marines moving with purpose, medics guiding stretchers, engineers already shoring up damaged sections of fence. For the first time since liftoff, Creed let himself believe they might hold the line. In the back seat, Zara watched the shifting patterns on her displays, the enemy icons pulling further from the perimeter. Her mission's data was safe, but cliffside was still her ground, and she wasn't about to see it fall while she was in the air to stop it. The sea wind off the cliff carried the acrid tang of spent propellant and scorched metal as Creed eased the Viper down onto the scarred landing pad. The skids kissed concrete with a muted shudder, the engines winding down into a low, throbbing idle. The world outside the canopy was still in motion. Marines in soot-smudged gear, medics crouched over stretchers, forklifts hauling debris from the east yard, a pair of fire crews hosing down a still-smoking wreck near the gate. Zara powered down the weapons systems, fingers moving with the same precision she'd used in the heat of battle. She popped the latch on her harness and stood, leaning to peer out past Creed at the base's battered skyline. The perimeter fencing sagged in two places, the twisted remnants of enemy technicals piled against it like discarded toys. When they dropped to the tarmac, the air felt heavier, as if the adrenaline in their blood had been propping it up before. Stroud was already moving toward them from the operations wing, Quinn a step behind with her tablet clutched against her chest. Both looked as though they'd been standing inside the eye of a storm, outwardly composed, but with an intensity in their eyes that hadn't cooled. "You held the line," Stroud said without preamble. "Both of you." His gaze swept the Viper's hull, noting the streaks of carbon scoring along one flank and the nick in a rotor blade. "And you brought it back in one piece." "Mostly," Creed said. "Some of those boats got lucky with their aim. Maintenance will want her in the hangar." Stroud nodded once, then gestured toward the command building. "Let's debrief before the next wave gets ideas." The conference room was small, windowless, lit by the hard white of overhead LEDs. A map of the base and surrounding terrain covered one wall, red grease pencil marks showing enemy approach vectors, impact zones and fallback points. Quinn set her tablet on the table, a single secure cable running from it to the wall terminal. "Transmission package from Falcon Eye is confirmed on the network. Command has the full dump. They're already passing it for high-priority targets." Zara sat forward, forearms braced on the table. "That means every port they use, every shell company they hide behind, every transit schedule. They've spent years building this web. Now we can cut it strand by strand." Stroud's eyes stayed on her. "And now they know you've done it." "They knew the moment their boats didn't come back," Zara said. "The rest was just confirmation." Creed leaned back in his chair, arms crossed loosely. "So what's the play? We sit tight and wait for them to regroup?" Quinn shook her head. "We don't have the luxury. The data gives us initiative, but only if we move before they adapt. In 48 hours they'll be shifting routes, burning identities, pulling ships off the water." "That's not my call to make," Stroud said. "But I can make damn sure Command hears it." He tapped the map with a blunt fingertip, tracing one of the sea approach lines. They wanted the Viper, but more than that, they wanted to knock this place off the board. Today was a probe and a smash and grab rolled into one. We gave them a bloody nose, but they'll be back with something sharper if we don't keep them looking elsewhere. Zara's gaze didn't leave the map. Then we make them look where we want. The room went quiet for a beat. "You're not suggesting," Quinn began. "I am," Zara cut in. "They're watching cliffside now. We feed them exactly the kind of bait they can't resist. Somewhere we choose, somewhere we control. We pull them off their real assets while Command starts cutting into their network." Creed studied her profile, calm, unwavering, the same expression she'd had cleaning the M197 that morning, only now the weapon was an entire strategy. Stroud's mouth tightened, but not in disapproval. "You're asking me to let you run an op out of my base that turns it into the lure in a trap. I'm saying you won't have to hold this base against another assault if they're busy getting gutted somewhere else," Zara replied. Quinn exhaled, a sound halfway between frustration and admiration. "It's risky as hell, and it might be the only way to keep them from tightening the noose here." Stroud looked between them, then gave a single short nod. "I'll float it up the chain, but if Command bites, you're going to be in the middle of it, Vale. That's not a suggestion." "I wouldn't want it any other way," she said. The debrief broke soon after, each leaving with a separate load of urgency. Outside, the base's noise had shifted. Less frantic gunfire, more the grind of recovery. The smell of burned fuel was still sharp in the air, carried on gusts from the east yard. Creed walked with Zara back toward the Viper's hangar. Mechanics were already moving her inside, chocks under the skids, panels open to inspect for stress cracks and shrapnel damage. He paused at the open nose, running a hand over the cannon's housing. "You work on a machine long enough," he said. "You know how it fights before it does. You and this bird." That was something to watch. Zara glanced at him, the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. "You kept her in the fight. That was something to fly. They left it there, the unspoken weight of the day settling into the spaces between words. From the upper deck of the hangar, Quinn stood watching them, her tablet now tucked under one arm. She wasn't one for sentiment, but she understood the quiet between two people who'd just walked out of a storm. In her line of work, storms rarely passed without taking something. She turned back toward the command wing, mind already on the next step. The data was in play, the enemy was stung, and somewhere in the dark, Iron Serpent would be deciding how to answer. The clock on that decision had already started. Command's reply came faster than anyone expected. Less than 6 hours after Stroud's encrypted brief, a green-lit confirmation flashed across Quinn's terminal. Authorization for an off-book counter-operation, parameters to be defined by Cliffside's command team. No official recognition, no chain of command oversight beyond the colonel. If it worked, Command would own the win. If it failed, Cliffside would carry the weight alone. In the conference room, the four of them stood around the wall map, its digital surface now reoriented to a section of coastline 50 nautical miles north. "Point Kestrel," Quinn said, tapping a narrow inlet shielded by high cliffs on 3 sides. "Once a supply station, now a skeleton. One approach by sea, one by a single access road. We plant the signal there, make it look like Falcon Eye's been moved for protection." Stroud's eyes narrowed at the topography. High ground on both flanks, perfect for overwatch, but no natural cover in the yard itself. "That's the point," Zara said. "We want them to think they can overrun it fast. They'll commit heavier if they believe it's a smash and grab." Creed crossed his arms. "And if they send air?" "They won't," Quinn said. "Satellite pass timing is in our favor. Their airborne assets are sitting 2 hours away on deck. If they launch, we'll see it in plenty of time." The colonel looked to Zara. "You're sure they'll bite? They just threw a combined sea-land assault at Cliffside to get their hands on Falcon Eye. They think it's the only thing that can burn their network. We leak that it's here, they'll come. It's personal now." Preparation began immediately. The base's tempo shifted from recovery to mobilization. Marines rotated off defense posts into equipment drills, the EOD teams packing remote detonated charges for the yard at Kestrel. In the hangar, Creed walked his crew through loading patterns, swapping out the Viper's standard load for a mix of area suppression and precision strike munitions. Zara spent hours with the comms section, scripting the bait transmission, a burst on the same frequency Price had used, repeating enough technical detail to be convincing, but laced with embedded markers Quinn could track. When it went live, Iron Serpent would think they were intercepting a sloppy relay between an extraction team and a command node. In truth, every packet was a breadcrumb leading to an ambush. That night, under red lighting in the operations bay, Stroud outlined the structure. 2 platoons on the ground, 1 visible, 1 buried in the cliffs, Viper overhead for first contact. Secondary fire support staged in the inlet, 2 patrol boats armed with 25mm cannons. Once they commit to the yard, we close the sea mouth and cut off their retreat. No survivors. No one spoke for a moment. It wasn't a question of morality, not against Iron Serpent. It was the reality of denying them the chance to regroup. Quinn broke the silence. The risk is them smelling the trap before they're inside it. Then, Stroud said, we make sure the scent is nothing but blood. 2 days later, Point Kestrel was unrecognizable from its abandoned state. Crates were stacked haphazardly in the open yard, tarps flapping in the sea wind. The skeleton of a comms tower bolted to an old fuel tank. At its heart, a reinforced container sat with its doors slightly ajar, just enough to hint at the sensitive equipment inside. In truth, the container housed nothing but hardened steel plates, a false Falcon Eye array bolted to the wall, and enough explosives to vaporize it in an instant. Zara stood in the container's doorway, helmet under one arm, studying the arrangement like a sculptor inspecting her own work. Looks just fragile enough to make them bold, she said to Creed, who was checking the Viper's fuel lines 30 yards away. You know they'll come in hard, he said. That's the idea. She glanced toward the cliffs, where Marines in camo netting were just visible to a practiced eye. And we'll be ready. Quinn's voice came from the portable ops tent near the shoreline. Transmission window opens in 5. Once it's out, the clock starts. Zara joined her at the terminal. The bait file was queued, the packet compressed into a form identical to Price's leak. The cursor blinked at the end of the command line. She pressed the key. On the screen, a status bar slid to completion. Sent, Quinn confirmed. Clean bounce through 3 relays. If they're listening, and they are, they'll pick it up in under 10 minutes. Stroud emerged from behind the tent flap, binoculars hanging against his chest. Positions now. The transformation was immediate. Visible personnel fell back into pre-designated cover, the unguarded yard settling into an engineered stillness. Up on the ridgelines, rifle barrels slid into firing nests. The patrol boats idled just outside the inlet mouth, their crews standing by. Creed climbed into the Viper, the canopy lowering with a hydraulic hiss. Zara followed, strapping into the back seat. The intercom clicked live. "Same rules as Cliffside?" Creed asked. "Same result," she said. The next 30 minutes stretched into an exercise in controlled waiting. The radio net carried only clipped position checks and the hiss of static. Every set of eyes scanned the horizon, the cliff shadows, the inlet mouth. The sea's rhythm seemed louder in the absence of movement. Then Quinn's voice, tight but steady, contact. "Fast movers, inbound from the southeast." 3 minutes to visual. Thermal shows 12 heat signatures per craft. Stroud keyed up. All stations, stand by to engage. Viper, your first strike. Creed's hands tightened on the controls. Copy that. Through the canopy, the line of the horizon broke. Low, dark shapes cutting white scars in the water, their bows aimed straight at the inlet. Zara armed the Viper's rockets, her HUD painting each target in turn. "They're coming in tight formation," she said. "Either very confident or very stupid." "Let's make it the latter," Creed replied, banking to bring them onto his nose. From the ridge, Quinn watched through a scope as the first boats entered the outer markers. They hadn't slowed, hadn't probed. They were charging headlong into the yard's kill zone, which meant the bait had worked, and the trap was about to spring. The first Iron Serpent boats punched through the mouth of the inlet like harpoons fired from the horizon. Sunlight glanced off spray-slick hulls, each craft's twin outboards snarling as they tore over the swells. They weren't slowing. In the Viper's front seat, Creed adjusted the seclic, feeling the machine's weight respond like a living thing. Zara's voice came over the intercom, calm but charged. "Targets 1 through 4 marked. Pattern Alpha." Creed rolled the Viper into a shallow dive, the cliffs rising on either side as they arrowed toward the yard. Below, the inlet narrowed, forcing the enemy boats into a compressed column, perfect for what came next. "Fox 3, Zara called, thumb pressing the release. 2 hydropods spat fire and smoke, a ripple of contrails arcing downward. The rockets struck in quick succession, one detonating against the lead boat's bow, shearing it nearly in half, the second slamming into the third in line, ripping its starboard side open and pitching its crew into the churn. From the ridge, marine gunners opened up, 7.62mm tracers slashing across the inlet's surface. The confined water became a killing ground, white spray and black smoke twisting together in the sun. The surviving boats tried to fan out, throttle screaming, but the inlet's narrowness boxed them in. One swerved toward the yard's dock, exactly where the patrol boats waited just beyond the pier. Their cannons roared, each burst a hammer blow that splintered decks and sent men tumbling into the tide. 4 boats disabled, Quinn's voice cut in from her perch above. 8 dismounting on the dock. Looks like they're pushing for the container. Creed brought the Viper around low over the yard, rotor wash blasting loose tarps into the air. Zara switched to the chain gun, stitching a line of fire across the open approach. Enemy fighters dove behind crate stacks, returning fire with bursts that pinged harmlessly off the container's armor plating. Stroud's hidden platoon broke cover then, emerging from concealed fighting positions along the inland road. Grenades arced overhead, bursting amid the enemy's makeshift cover. The clash became a brutal crossfire. Serpent fighters caught between the yard's unguarded center and the cliffs, now alive with muzzle flashes. One of them, a tall figure in black combat webbing, broke from the group and sprinted for the container's doors. He managed 3 steps before Zara's burst took him off his feet, his rifle skittering across the concrete. "Still think they won't smell the trap?" Creed said, banking for another pass. "They don't have time to," she replied. "Push them." The enemy tried to adapt, using smoke canisters to obscure the yard, their silhouettes darting through the haze toward the container. It was the move Zara had been waiting for. "Trigger 1," she called on the net. From the ridge, an EOD sergeant thumbed a detonator. A line of pre-placed charges along the yard's eastern edge erupted, flinging debris and bodies alike. The blast funneled the survivors back toward the inlet, straight into the patrol boat's overlapping fields of fire. But Iron Serpent wasn't breaking yet. 2 fighters shouldered RPGs, loosing shots toward the Viper. Creed yanked the collective, the helicopter lurching skyward as one rocket spiraled harmlessly beneath them. The second clipped a crane arm, sending rusted steel screaming to the concrete. "Those launchers have to go," Creed growled. Zara didn't argue. Marking, a short burst from the M197 tore through the smoke, the impact flaring bright as the munitions cooked off. Both gunners vanished in the blast. On the dock, Stroud moved among his Marines, barking short orders, his rifle firing in tight, efficient bursts. They pressed forward, retaking the yard meter by meter, until only a handful of Serpent fighters remained pinned between the container and the sea. Then through the chaos, Quinn's voice, sharper now. Thermal shows inbound. 2 more boats, smaller profile, high speed, possible exfil or reinforcement. Not if we close the door, Stroud answered. Trigger 2. This time, the charges were underwater. The inlet mouth erupted in twin plumes, collapsing pre-rigged rockfall into the channel. The remaining boats skidded hard to avoid collision, one striking the rocks and flipping bow over stern. It was over in under 4 minutes. The survivors, dazed and bleeding, were forced to their knees under the rifles of Stroud's platoon. Smoke drifted over the yard, the container still sitting in its place, battered, pocked with shrapnel, but intact. Zara dropped from the Viper, boots crunching over grit and brass. She walked straight to the container, ducking inside to confirm what she already knew. The false falcon eyes sat in place, untouched. The charges wired into its frame blinked a steady green. She keyed her radio. All stations, final trigger in 3, 2, 1. The blast was controlled but devastating, the container imploding inward as the explosives did their work. When the dust cleared, there was nothing left but twisted steel and a scorched patch of concrete. Quinn joined her, eyes scanning the yard. They'll report this as a failure. They'll think they missed the real thing again. That's the point, Zara said. We keep them chasing ghosts until we cut their legs out from under them. Creed landed the Viper just inside the yard, the rotor wash driving away the lingering smoke. Stroud came up to them, helmet under one arm. Command will call this a win, he said. I call it the first step. Zara met his gaze. Then let's take the next one before they learn how to walk again. The sea wind carried the scent of salt and cordite. Above, gulls wheeled in the thermals, oblivious to the battle just ended, but every man and woman in that yard knew it wasn't over. Not for Iron Serpent and not for them. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the next move was already being planned. The smoke from Point Kestrel still clung to Zara's fatigues when she stepped into the debriefing chamber at Cliffside. The air in the room was dry and sharp, the smell of recycled ventilation masking faint traces of salt. Stroud was already there, helmet on the table, eyes locked on a screen filled with pulsing red markers. They broke faster than I expected, he said without looking at her. The prisoners are talking. Quinn sat to one side, fingers flying over a portable decryption terminal. More like slipping, she corrected. They think we're going to hand them to maritime security for a public trial. They're spilling intel to buy a deal they'll never get. Zara leaned forward, her shadow falling across the display. Anything worth moving on? Quinn's lips curved in a tight half smile. One of them had a locator frequency in a private comm buffer, same encryption pattern Price used, but with a variant we haven't seen. It pinged once during the Kestrel op. I'm tracing it now. On the far end of the room, Creed leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. If it's genuine, it's where their command cell ran the op from. Not just ran it, Quinn said. Controlled it. Live. The locator's trace built slowly on the screen, 3 arcs from different satellites tightening on a single point. A continent away inland, buried deep inside the broken highlands of an unmarked valley, Stroud exhaled through his nose. Iron Serpent's operations hub. The room was silent for a beat. It wasn't just the thought of taking down the network, it was the awareness of what that meant. This was the kind of strike that would leave them exposed if it went wrong. Command won't approve this officially, Quinn said, reading the doubt on their faces. Zara stepped back, folding her arms. Then we don't ask, we use what we have. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and make sure they can't crawl out of the hole we bury them in. Within hours, the yard outside Cliffside was alive again, this time not with the aftermath of defense, but the prelude to an offensive. 2 tilt-rotor Ospreys were pulled from storage, their engines tested until the fuselage shivered with readiness. In the hangar, Creed's Viper underwent another weapons refit. A mix of precision-guided Hellfires, dual hydropods, and enough 30mm ammunition to lay waste to anything between them and the target. Stroud called in favors from 2 Allied Marine units, each providing a squad of recon-trained infantry. Their orders were clear, breach clear, secure. Quinn worked without rest, building a false comm signature to broadcast during the op, one that would make it appear, to any outside observer, like a simple training exercise in a remote valley. In the operations bay, Zara studied the valley's layout on a wall-sized projection. "Main compound here," she said, tapping the center. Steel wall, 20 feet high, with 2 watchtowers at the north and west corners. East side is a cliff, impassable except for one goat path. South is the main gate, reinforced. Expect drones overhead, ground sensors on every approach. Creed tilted his head toward the map. Overhead insert puts us in their engagement envelope before we're close. We go low level, masking against the ridges, Viper in close support. Stroud pointed at a narrow drainage gully. "That's our ingress for ground units." We split. One team pushes on the gate, the other uses the goat path to cut into their rear security. "And the command center?" Quinn asked. "That's mine," Zara said. Dawn found them 100 miles from the valley. The ospreys crouched in a mountain clearing like predators waiting to spring. The air was thin, the cold biting through flight suits as crews loaded final gear. Zara moved through her team, checking weapons, tapping shoulders, exchanging quiet nods. She paused at Creed's Viper, running a hand along its fuselage. "We're not getting a second shot at this." He looked at her through the canopy. "Then we make the first one count." The tilt rotors lifted, their twin discs throwing snow and dust in violent spirals. Creed followed in the Viper, hugging the terrain, weaving between ridge spines that broke the sky into jagged strips. As the valley mouth came into view, Quinn's voice crackled in over the net. "Sensor field ahead, jamming active in 3, 2, 1. The static hissed, then vanished. "Go!" Stroud ordered. The ospreys dropped to less than 100 feet above the gully floor, banking hard to disappear into the shadows. From above they would look like a low, dark blur against the rock. The first shots came from the north tower, tracer lines arcing down, chewing into the gully's lip. Creed's Viper rose into view, 30mm gun barking in short, brutal bursts. The tower shuddered, its upper platform collapsing in a cloud of splinters and twisted steel. Ground units surged forward. At the gate, the lead squad deployed a breaching charge, the blast reverberating through the valley. Smoke and dust poured outward as they pushed into the compound. From the goat path, Zara's flanking team picked off rooftop gunners, their suppressed rifles dropping shapes into the dust. She broke off at the compound's east wall, climbing a steel service ladder to a maintenance hatch. Inside, the air was hot and metallic. She moved fast, boots silent on grated walkways, rifle angled tight to her shoulder. The command center was 3 corridors in, a reinforced door with 2 guards. She fired twice, both bodies dropping before their weapons cleared their slings. The room beyond was dimly lit, banks of monitors casting pale light across a single figure at the central console. He didn't turn when she entered. "I wondered," he said, his voice smooth accented, "if you would come yourself." She recognized him from the briefings. Serpent's field coordinator, codename Virix, the man who had orchestrated both Cliffside and Kestrel. "You've been bleeding for months," Zara said, stepping closer. "You just didn't feel it until now." He looked over his shoulder, smiling faintly. "Cut off the head, the body dies. Isn't that what they told you? But I am not the head. I am the blade." His hand moved toward the console. Zara fired. A single shot that shattered the panel inches from his fingers. "Stand up," she ordered. Instead, he lunged sideways, hitting a recessed switch. Somewhere deep in the compound, alarms wailed. On the monitors, she saw automated turrets swing into motion. targeting the gate teams. Creed's voice cut through the net. They've got armor, light APCs rolling out from the south hangar. Zara moved fast, dragging Virex from the console and slamming him against the wall. Override, now. He laughed, blood at the corner of his mouth. Too late, she hit her comm. Creed, take out the hangar. The Viper swooped low, Hydra rockets screaming into the structure. The hangar erupted, steel sheets peeling back in a blossom of fire. The APCs never made it past the threshold. In the chaos, Virex twisted free, bolting toward a side door. Zara was after him instantly, boots pounding down a stairwell into the compound's sublevel. The sublevel was a maze of storage corridors, flickering lights casting long shadows. Virex ducked between crates, firing blindly over his shoulder. A round clipped Zara's vest, spinning her sideways. But she kept moving, breath harsh in her ears. He burst into a wide chamber lined with server racks. The real nerve center. Data pulsed in green and amber lights, the hum of cooling fans loud in the stale air. "This is where you keep your ghosts," she said. He turned to face her, weapon shaking in his grip. "This is where we survive you." The exchange was fast, brutal. His first shot missed by inches. Hers found his thigh, dropping him to one knee. She closed the distance, kicking the gun from his hand. "Survival's over," she said, and drove him into the floor. Minutes later, Quinn's team was in the server chamber, hard drives yanked and bagged for exfil. Stroud reported the yard secure, all enemy resistance neutralized. Creed hovered the Viper over the compound, its shadow cutting across the smoldering remains of the hangar. They moved Virex under guard to the Osprey, his expression unreadable, even in defeat. As they lifted from the valley, Zara looked down at the compound, shrinking beneath them, the wall breached, smoke curling into the pale sky. Back at Cliffside, the servers were locked in a secure vault, already on their way to cryptanalysis. Stroud stood with her on the overlook, the sea crashing against the rocks below. "You cut deep," he said. "Not deep enough," she replied. He nodded once. "Then we sharpened the knife." In the hangar, Creed shut down the Viper, the last whine of its turbines fading into the evening. Quinn walked past with a datapad, pausing just long enough to say, "Whatever's in those drives, it's not the end, it's the start." Zara didn't answer. She just looked out toward the horizon, where the sky met the water in a thin silver line. Somewhere beyond it, someone else was already planning the next strike. The war against Iron Serpent wasn't over. It had just gone silent again. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones that leave the battlefield silent. When the dust settled over the Iron Serpent Valley, no one cheered. There were no medals handed out, no photographers waiting by the tarmac. Only the sound of cooling metal, the hiss of steam, and the slow, uneven breathing of people who had given everything and knew the fight wasn't over. Zara Vale didn't walk away from Cliffside with glory. She walked away with names, names of the dead, names of the living, names of those still in the shadows, waiting to be found, waiting to be cut from the serpent's coils. In another life she might have gone back to her tools, back to the quiet corner of the hangar where she could vanish in the noise of turning wrenches. But that life was over the moment Creed saw the patch on her sleeve, the moment Stroud looked at her like a weapon he'd thought was long gone. She hadn't chosen to be Shadow Vortex again, but sometimes the war chooses you. In the days that followed, Command would try to understand what they'd captured. Quinn disappeared into secured rooms with the drives, emerging only to scrawl cryptic strings of code on whiteboards and curse under her breath about what she was finding. Stroud spoke less than usual, but when he did, it was always about preparing for the next one. Creed kept flying, short hops over the coastline, drills with marine detachments, anything to keep the Viper's engines warm. And Zara? She spent her hours between the ocean and the hangar, one eye on the horizon, one hand on the metal skin of the Viper, as if she could feel the vibration of the next fight coming. War doesn't end when the shooting stops. Not this war. Iron Serpent wasn't just a network, it was a living, breathing thing. You cut off one head, it grows another. You burn its nest, it builds in the dark. And for all the ground they'd taken, for all the hard drives full of secrets now locked in Cliffside's vault, the Serpent was still out there, coiled in places no one had yet looked. But for the first time in years, Zara Vale wasn't running from it. For the first time in years, she was hunting. Maybe that's the part the history books will never get right. They'll write about the operations, the strikes, the declassified files, if they write about her at all. But they won't write about the weight she carried, the nights she spent in the hangar long after the lights went out, tracing the outline of the Shadow Vortex insignia with her thumb like it was both a scar and a promise. They won't write about the way Creed learned to fly lower than the manuals allowed, because Zara told him once, "The ground's your best cover if you respect it." They won't write about the day Quinn slammed her hand on the table and said, "They're running a second network, and it's bigger." And they definitely won't write about the silence that falls in the seconds before a battle begins. The silence Zara had lived in for too long, the silence she'd learned to break. You and I, we know better. We know that every battle worth fighting leaves something behind, something you can't carry in your hands, but you carry in your bones. That's why I'm telling you this story, because the world doesn't run on medals and parades. It runs on the quiet, unshakable people who don't quit when the news cameras leave. The ones who fix the engines, watch the radar, read the encrypted files no one else understands. The ones who know that if you wait for permission to do what's right, you'll be too late. And maybe, just maybe, you've seen a bit of Zara Vale in someone you know. Someone who hides more than they show. Someone who's been through more than they'll ever tell you. Someone who doesn't need the world to understand them. They just need the world to be safer than they found it. If you take anything from this, let it be this. You don't need a uniform to be dangerous to the people who prey on the weak. You don't need a medal to leave a mark. And you don't need the whole world to know your story, for your story to matter. Because somewhere out there, the Serpent is still moving. Somewhere out there, someone is holding the line against it, and they don't even have backup. So maybe you are that backup. Maybe you're the one who shows up when no one else will. Maybe you're the one who hears the silence and answers. This is Veteran Biker, and if this story found you tonight, I want you to do one thing for me before you go. Look around you. Think about the people who make your world safer, stronger, better, even if you've never thanked them for it. Drop their names in the comments. Let them know you see them. And if you ride with us every week, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. Not because the algorithm wants you to, but because these stories deserve to live in more than one corner of the internet. Until next time, keep your head on a swivel, watch the ridgelines, trust your crew, and remember, not every shadow means danger. But sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the world is the shadow you never saw coming. Stay safe out there. We'll ride again soon.